You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is Friday, January 24th, and ooh, baby, did a lot happen in the last 24 hours. 49er fans, of course, have been tracking it all since the news that Liam Cohen, the Bucs offensive coordinator, or should I say former, he engaged in talks with the Jags once again. If you recall, he had thrown himself out of contention for it not too long ago, like a day ago. And then we heard that he was in cahoots with them again, speaking to them, trying to keep it a secret. It was very wild. I mean, moments like that is exactly why Twitter exists and why it's awesome, because you get up to the minute updates on what's going on. And man, the tea was hot when it came to Liam Cohen and his efforts to keep his discussions with the Jags secret, but it got out anyway. And that's a good thing for the 49ers, because we've been tracking that situation closely, because Robert Saleh seemed to be one of the top candidates there. Of course, like, the Jags were also interested in Ben Johnson. As I mentioned, they were interested in Liam Cohen. That was their second choice. When he dropped out, then they fired Trent Baalke, former 49ers GM, who seems to, ruin things for teams, but continues to get opportunities. Well, the Jags then fired him. And so that piqued the interest of Liam Cohen again to engage with the Jags in becoming their head coach. And all in all, within 12 hours after we got that report, it seemed like that deal is pretty much certain. It was made official some hours ago. And so, yeah, we've got Liam Cohen, head coach of the Jags, which squarely puts Robert Saleh back in San Francisco, because all the reports to this point have indicated that Robert Saleh would come back as a 49ers defensive coordinator if he did not get a head coaching gig. That Jags head coaching opening was really his clearest path to being a head coach. And now that has been occupied by Liam Cohen, again, that is official. Robert Saleh seems imminent to become the 49ers defensive coordinator once again. Now, I wanted to have Johnny Dells on this show, and also Wayne Breezy on the show, because all three of us are going to be at the Senior Bowl next week. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity to talk about, who we're excited for, and then also talk about the Saleh stuff. Johnny is on his way, so we're going to keep it warm over here for him, live chat and all that. We're going to wait for his arrival. Wayne, we'll see if he's able to make it, but just stay tuned, because those guys will be joining. All right, so on the Saleh stuff, though, I mean, I'm definitely pumped that everything worked out for the 49ers, because, again, we've been saying they've been putting their eggs in the Robert Saleh basket, and I think the concern – oh, yeah, so Breezy's live right now. All good. And I know he was going on Bleacher Report, so he told me he might not be able to make it. All right. So all that being said, Saleh coming back to the 49ers, I think was a good thing, but it does not excuse, I want to make this very clear here on my show and my channel, that to me, it doesn't excuse what I took as bad process by the 49ers by not interviewing other candidates. Like, there was only the one, two interviews besides Brandon Staley that they had, which was Robert Saleh and Deshae Townsend. Those were the only two that they interviewed, and they waited for Robert Saleh, and they're lucky, in my opinion, that it all worked out for them. Who knows? Maybe they knew some things that we didn't, but I still would have liked them to interview other candidates, even if Robert Saleh was their top choice. It's fine to have a top choice. It's also fine to interview other people. you know? So I would have liked to see that, but lucky for the 49ers and fortunate for all of us, it worked out to a T. It certainly made us sweat, like we were nervous about the direction of the DC search. And, a lot of us were even thinking Brandon Staley might end up becoming the 49ers defensive coordinator if things go awry and Robert Saleh ends up getting a head coaching gig, right? But fortunately, Liam Cohen set off a chain reaction that benefited the 49ers. And again, Robert Saleh back with San Francisco. Now, I just wanted to show you guys the 49ers defense throughout the years, right? So I went back to 2019, 2020. You could see some of these stats here: points per game, yards per game, third down percentage, red zone percentage, turnovers. All right. And you can see where each defensive coordinator kind of falls in all of these categories here. It's been a mixed bag, as far as, something like turnovers. It definitely has been a mixed bag. There's been no season worse than Nick Sorensen's 2024, where the 49ers only had 17 turnovers. And I got Johnny Dells here with me backstage, so I'm going to bring him on right now. Johnny, what's going on, man?
Hey, how's it going? So far, so sorry for being late. I was tied up with something with my kids, and I was like, dang it, I gotta go.
I was late. So yeah, I apologize to everyone that was waiting as well. Life happens, man. And life happened with Liam Cohen and Robert Saleh, and it's worked out well for the 49ers. So I'm just telling all the good folks here about Robert Saleh's time as defensive coordinator, how that looked. I really do feel like D'Amico and his time with the 49ers was slightly better, although that 2019 season for Saleh was like insane. And I think a lot of it also did have to do with personnel. And I don't think, like, we know that Nick Sorensen got, a raw deal a little bit, right? Like, he might have not been a good coach, but he had the worst personnel by far than any of these defensive coordinators have had, since Kyle Shanahan has been the head coach of the 49ers, right? So both things are true. But what are your thoughts about this hiring? And again, it's not official yet, but all signs point and all reports have been that Robert Saleh is expected to be back with the 49ers as defensive coordinator. Of course, like Liam Cohen taking that Jags job makes it all but official. So we'll continue to wait for the official announcement. But how do you feel about this news?
Well, I mean, I think after what we saw this last season, the thing that was most frustrating was, yes, there were a lot of injuries on the defensive side, but you also had several guys playing, above expectation, like a Malik Mustafa, who seemed like, was playing very well. You have Nick Bosa's playing very well. Yes, he missed some time. Leonard Floyd is getting nearly 10 sacks, but yet the team was so often you would see third and long, and it was like it was guaranteed that they were going to give up a conversion because the defense just became so predictable. It was either pressure and just man coverage behind it, or it was straight, cover two and 4-man rush. And when they would do that, the creative rushes just weren't there. What we've seen over the last, I think, 2 defensive coordinator cycles was, and you understand it from their backgrounds, these were defensive back guys. They were secondary guys. And that creativity in the front, that somewhere in there, whether it seems like that working with Chris Kasurik has not been on the same page. And I don't know what's going on behind the scenes that caused that, but it just has seemed like ever since Saleh and D'Amico, the front and the coverage side have not been paired together well. Right. And it's just been a problem, and it leads to poor pass rush, which then, your coverage unit is grading well, they're playing well, but there's almost no pass rush in a lot of those moments, or it's just so predictable that teams are able to just at will, 3rd and 9, it's a conversion. And we saw that a lot with Steve Wilkes' defense. He was good in points because they were forcing a lot of field goals because they were such a good, talented defense. They had a lot of talent on that defense. But it was like we were always frustrated because time of possession was almost always 50-50 49ers and their opponents. So it's like with the amount of points you're allowing, these should be all be blowout games. But it wasn't. And then that was, I think, really frustrating. And I think Steve Wilkes was really helped out by the beginning of the season when the team was 6-0. And then as teams, it was like you could see the defensive progression just as the season went. It just got worse and worse and worse and worse. The defense was not trending in the right direction. And so that early part of the defense, I remember I think it was 14 points per game through the first 5 games of the year that defense was allowing. I mean, that was very low. And then to get up to 19 from there, you have to be averaging like 22, 23 points per game. So, now we did see a similar thing with Saleh in 2019. I was just about to go double check on all that stuff. But that was very much due to the injuries, right? There were some very key injuries, most notably D Ford. If you remember,
yes.
D Ford got hurt. Then Armstead was dealing with some stuff. DeForest Buckner was dealing with some stuff. They talked about it. They're like, yeah, we were dealing with some stuff near the end of the season. That bye week really helped them get healthy on their front. But when that started happening, those injuries, their defense, as far as what they were giving up per game, really shot up. And it really kicked off with that Saints game. Before that, they were, it was like 17 points, 23, 7, 0, 13, 25, 27, 26, 8, 20. And then the last 4 games of the year was 46, 29, 31, 21, right? So that defense, like, while his points per game, was actually less than D'Amico's 2022 and Wilkes' 2023, like that entire defense, if we remember the first 12 games of that year, that defense was unreal. And I think that's what we're looking for, is maximizing the talent that you have on the field.
Wayne has joined us. What up, man? It's been a while since you've been on the show. Yes. I'm excited to have you back. How you been?
I'm good. I'm under the weather a little bit, trying to get myself healthy because we're going to be in Alabama in a few days. So out there having some fun.
Y'all just missed the snow. I mean, it just dumped 7 inches of snow in Mobile. Like,
I didn't even know it snowed in Mobile. I thought I was going south to get some heat. Wow. Okay. Okay. Not happening. Okay.
Now you know what to prepare for. We got to bring the jackets and we got to bring the
jackets. Remember last year I dressed super warm and it was hot. Because the year prior,
in the 70s all week.
And the year prior I went, it was cold, so I was like, "Oh, I'm good." So now I know, straight up hoodies and maybe a parka, something like that. Yeah, got you,
bro. That's fire.
I think it's a good plan. But Wayne, we're just reacting to this Robert Saleh news, and we do have some more news to pile on. But before I do that, I just want to ask you how you think. What do you think about Robert Saleh returning to the 49ers?
You know me, like I'm an old school guy. Like, it wasn't broke when he left, and I feel like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I do understand that he wanted to go and become a head coach, and he tried it, and it didn't work out. But he built this system here defensively, and I just feel like he's the guy that needs to come in here and fix it. I do understand the cons that he can potentially leave and become a head coach again. Understand all that, but I can care less if we win a Super Bowl. Like I think at the end of the day, we're watching our defense kind of like wither away. Like they'll play good for 2 quarters, 3 quarters, and in the 4th quarter they just ain't got it. Like they just run out of gas, they run out of energy, they don't know how to tackle anymore, they can't stop the run. And I just feel like Saleh knows how to he's that type of coach that can kind of dig in the extra 10%. You know how they say that extra 10%? He can get that extra 10% out of his players, and he's trusted by Colin. I think that's the most important part. So I'm hoping that this all works out to where he does become the defensive coordinator, but I just feel like it's not done yet. And so I'm hoping it all works out, because I feel like that's the guy Kyle wants. If that's the guy Kyle wants, that means that Kyle fully trusts him. Kyle doesn't have to babysit anymore on the defensive side, and he can get back to offensive play calling and being a genius.
Which will probably help out the offense. I think, that's been missing, the energy factor. I think the fact that you want someone who's such a strong DC that they can almost be the head coach of the defense. I truly think that's what Saleh was, what D'Amico was, and they've just been missing that. since both of those guys have left. So definitely something that we would welcome back. But yes, as you mentioned, it's not done yet. And, one thing that, was just on my Twitter feed right now, Matt Barrows apparently said, and must have been on the Tim K podcast that they have together, 49ers Plus Minus. Matt Barrows says there's a slight fear within the 49ers front office that the Cowboys or Raiders can make an offer to Robert Saleh. Although, it seems like Pete Carroll is going to be the guy for the Raiders. So it seems like maybe the Cowboys are the only team to worry about. And the exact quote from Matt Barrows is, there's a slight fear among the 49ers that there could be some last-ditch offer made to Saleh from the Cowboys as their head coach. But yeah, I mean, I think the Pete Carroll thing, is that official? Or was that?
Yeah.
The Pete Carroll thing is pretty much official,
Yeah.
Okay. I think they probably recorded this like late last night. So that makes sense. Pete Carroll going to the Raiders, don't have to worry about that. Cowboys still looking for their head coach. Now, I know their offensive coordinator, Schottenheimer, seems to be the lead guy there. But yeah, they were reportedly interested in Robert Saleh. So I don't know if there's been an official interview. I don't remember ever seeing a report of an official interview with the Cowboys. Do you guys recall them announcing that?
I thought
haven't heard anything.
I don't know if there was an official interview, but I thought I remember them saying that they wanted to interview him. I'm not sure if he went or did it remotely, but it'll probably come out. God forbid this happens and he becomes head coach. It would be crazy. Listen, if Robert Saleh, oh my gosh, if Robert Saleh did any one of these other than the 49ers, he would go from the beloved Robert Saleh to public enemy number one. Like, you can't go to those two teams. Like, you can't go to the Cowboys and you can't go to the freaking Raiders. Like, the 49er fan base will go bananas.
Would not be good. But obviously we're still hoping for the best here, and I'm continuing to check my Twitter for any updates that we may get in the meantime. Like, 49ers still waiting for Saleh. And so, like, before we went live or before you guys joined, like, I was kind of mentioning how I wasn't a huge fan of the process to begin with, putting all of your eggs in the Robert Saleh basket. I love Saleh. I love the idea of bringing him back. I love the idea of having him be your top choice. Every team has a top choice. You got to go all out for that person. But for that to be like kind of the only guy that they interviewed besides the Shea Townsend and Brandon Staley, I think, was kind of a disservice to this whole process of wanting to bring people. Now, I know, Johnny, you have been adamant on Twitter that just because it hasn't been reported doesn't mean that the 49ers weren't having conversations in the background. And I agree with that as well. I think there were definitely probably conversations that were had with other candidates that ultimately probably did not, result in interviews. But in any case, like, I got to then wonder, why didn't interviews happen? Like, then that's the question. Is that concerning, right? So I just wasn't a huge fan of the process to begin with. And, there's even still that chance that Saleh goes elsewhere, right? If that were to happen, worst case scenario, what do the 49ers do then? It just felt like they were hoping for one thing, and it seems like it's going in that direction, but there's always still that chance it doesn't.
I think the difficulty in it is that Saleh is your clear number one, and it's a hard place to be in when you're going, do I move forward from him because his head coaching search is taking longer than we thought it was going to? I talked about it soon after Saleh was fired, and we were having so many issues on the defense side of the ball. I said, if I was Kyle Shanahan, I would be texting Robert Saleh every single day and just checking in on him. And how's the kids doing? How's everything going? Setting this up so that you could hire him as quickly as possible. Coming out, as far as we know, I mean, it was pretty quick after the season ended. Kyle just wanted to, take a day or two and say, I just want to make sure that I'm not just firing Nick Sorensen because I'm just, the defense did play so poorly and I'm reactionary. And then, we've let him know he's not the defense coordinator. And so you're moving forward as far as we knew with Robert Saleh immediately. It becomes a question where I just wonder about, okay, do they call Dennis Allen? And Dennis Allen says, well, okay, if Robert Saleh agrees, is he your defensive coordinator? And you say, well, yeah. And he goes, well, okay, then I'm not going to wait around for Robert Saleh to make his decision either. And so I'm going to go interview other places. If I'm still available, circle back to me. And I think that's probably the answer they got from a lot of people was, if I'm still there and Robert Saleh is somewhere else, then we'll talk. But I'm not going to waste my time coming in when Robert Saleh is your clear number one and you believe he's not going to get a head coaching gig. I don't think he's going to get a head coaching gig, but we'll see. I think that's where they were really left, was there's candidates. I mean, everybody knew from 50, 100 miles away that Robert Saleh was their clear candidate of choice. And I think that does scare away candidates. I think they're going to go, well, I'm going to go figure out where I'm going to be because there's only so many spots out there. Dennis Allen's going to go get a job as quickly as he can. He needs some sort of stability for his family. All these guys, I think they're going to try and get their jobs as quickly as they can, and they're not going to sit there and hold out on the 49ers waiting for them or waiting to figure out what's going on to then maybe interview them, maybe fly them out there. I don't know. This whole Liam Cohen situation, I think, really sent some ripple effects throughout the league.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah.
I think it's both to what both of you guys said, right? Like, so eggs in the basket. So that's what Steph was saying. The Niners put all the eggs in the Saleh basket. I think every coordinator they might have called and checked in on, see if they were going to be available. I think they kind of felt that way. So they decided to focus on their future. So it kind of hurt the 49ers because, like you just said, maybe on the telephone, Johnny, they said, hey, man, that's going to be our number one guy if he's available. No one wanted to wait around on it. So if this doesn't happen, and it sounds like Brandon Staley's out the door too, who is going to be the defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers? Like, if this doesn't go down, and I think it's a small percentage chance that it doesn't happen, like maybe like 0.01 or something like that, right? Very small, but there's a possibility because we just threw him out there. It could come back and bite the Niners in the butt. And so, like, that to me is what I'm a little bit concerned about. Because like us, we ready to start scouting. We ready to start moving on. We want to figure out who our coordinator is. All right, this is the players. These are the players he likes. Blah, 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 blah. Like, we can't do anything. And so I'm sure Kyle's in that same situation. And I know Kyle wants to get it done. But if the eggs are in the basket on the Saleh, they got to sit back and kind of wait. And I'm hoping that their friendship, their relationship, their buddyship, whatever they have, is super solid. And I really do believe that it is. Because I don't think Kyle would be silly enough to sit back and wait, even though there was the report saying that there was a little nervousness going on. But like you said, this Cohen situation, I don't know what's going on in the NFL. Like yeah, I'm gonna be here, and then secretly I'm not here. I'm here. That's some crazy stuff. So like, I'm hoping that drama doesn't follow the 49ers. Not for coaching. We deal with enough with the players.
Indeed, we are.
I wonder if the Brandon Staley situation is because they're working out Robert Saleh as assistant head coach. Is that something he wants on there? Is that some sort of language that needs to be there, for something? And so, because remember, Brandon Staley had the title of assistant head coach.
Correct.
So is that the result of this? Is that what they're working through? Is that a sitting down and saying, Kyle's going, well, I kind of want Brandon Staley here, and Robert Saleh going, well, I want the title of assistant head coach, because then there's other things that can come with that, as far as guarantees of draft picks that you get to have, and if you're giving a defensive coordinator draft picks, does that mean that Chris Foerster gets a draft pick that he gets to have himself? And because this can have ripple effect, where if you're putting somebody as assistant head coach, then yes, we can give them 2 draft picks, and that works. There's a lot of, I think, that working out, and there is the discussion. They're not going to announce Robert Saleh as assistant head coach, and that Brandon Staley's gone before they've told Brandon Staley. So I do wonder if there's some of that that's trying to get worked out in the building, and can they still find a place for Brandon Staley? What does he want to do? And exactly how does that process work out?
Yeah. Well, as far as Saleh being the number one choice. And I get it, teams kind of knowing and putting two and two together. Of course, he was going to be the top choice for the 49ers. I don't feel like they did enough to deter anyone from that sentiment. Like, they made it obvious. They played their hand, like, and said, Saleh's our number one guy. We're going to wait for him. So that's just what's going to happen. Like, there was no effort to make it seem like they had interest in anyone else. So I wasn't a fan of that either. But I think what you mentioned, Johnny, is interesting. You know, like, I think behind the scenes, because Saleh's their first choice, and because there's that slight fear, a possibility that he goes elsewhere, right? I think you got to make it more enticing. We already knew that they had offered him to be the highest paid defensive coordinator, right? Matt Barrows had already said that. So I think with him still, going after those head coaching opportunities, which, I don't think we can blame him for. I think to make it a little more enticing, yeah, I guess it wouldn't shock me if the 49ers said, hey, you know what? Like, we'll also throw in assistant head coach title. How is that? Like, can you come back to the table and not entertain these other offers? Like, what's up now? So, I think that is definitely maybe part of it as well. But I think also maybe the writing was on the wall for Brandon Staley, that if Saleh did get the job, like, what point is there to Brandon Staley? I think a large part of the reason that he was hired to begin with was to, help Nick Sorensen in anything he needed to, kind of consult him in anything he needed to, definitely handle the DBs and all that. And so I think there's no need for Brandon Staley. And yeah, I think it was Matt Mayoko who said that, he's getting the sense he definitely will not be returning. Same has been said about Nick Sorensen, right? Right. So it seems like they've parted ways, right? So yeah, I definitely think that's part of it. And Wayne had to depart because he's going to Bleacher Report.
He parted ways as well.
He parted ways. But no, that was fun, and we're gonna see each other out at the Senior Bowl, like we said, and we'll probably do another live after that to recap that. But yeah, Johnny, it's just a lot of moving parts, right? And not just in the 49ers wheelhouse, but like all these dominoes around the NFL that have potentially impacted the 49ers and them being able to hire their defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I mean, this has been, I think, for me, sorry about anybody who had low audio issues. I checked my Windows, and for some reason, Windows turned my volume down to 40% on my mic. I don't know why that happened. But this has been one of the wildest, I think, coaching search cycles that I've seen in a long time. I mean, you have Pete Carroll coming out of retirement, that forced retirement that he had to coach the Raiders. Man, what is it about 70-plus-year-old men and those casino buffets? They can't turn them down. But you have that happening. You have this Liam Cohen situation. You have the 49ers. It looks like you're going to get Saleh, and then he's getting more head coaching buzz than I think any of us thought. I thought after what happened in New York and the debacle that was the Aaron Rodgers offensive situation in New York, that he would not get a head coaching look for probably 4 years. I was saying most of the season, I'm like, go get Saleh. He's going to be your Spagnuolo, who's going to be there for a long time and not get these head coaching gigs. And all of a sudden, it's like everybody who's got a head coaching opening is looking at Saleh. And I think that, again, should reinforce to everybody who said it's time for the 49ers to move away from the scheme. It's time for, this stuff to change. And you go, then we need to remember, how good of a defensive coach Robert Saleh has been for a very long time now. And that obviously the league is looking at this and saying this man brings a lot to the defensive table. That as bad as things were on the offensive side in New York, that what he brings on the defensive side and what he brings in leading an organization wise is still that good. That he's still getting all these looks. I don't know anybody who's been fired 5 games into a season that was then looked at by more than one team, multiple teams, the next offseason. I mean, what does that speak to how much the owners around the league view Woody Johnson? I mean, that everybody who's had an opening has looked at the guy that Woody Johnson fired after 5 games into the year. just be glad we're not Jets fans. So,
That is for sure. That is for sure.
but yeah,
Now kind of a side discussion here, and I don't want to get into it too much, but like I've also seen people say that, and I think you were in the same thread of someone, Nick Ellert, saying this on Twitter, that it could have been a fake interview for Saleh with the Rooney Rule, and I'm so appalled because there was actually some like an actual report of from another team. Was it the Cowboys or it was some other team saying that like, yeah, they weren't actually interested in like two of the candidates that they brought in. It was really just to satisfy the Rooney Rule, and they didn't want those coaches to find out. It's just disgusting. But anyway, I think we know that happens around the league, unfortunately, right? So there's that possibility that that's why Saleh is getting looked at. Unfortunately, I think the reason that I did not think that was that it was a fake interview for Saleh is because he's legitimately a good coach, and I think his time as the New York Jets head coach was cut short not because of anything he did wrong. I mean, obviously, like the quarterback position, they didn't get right there, but I don't think you could blame someone for thinking that Aaron Rodgers is going to work out. You know, future Hall of Famer, and all that. So, yeah, I think he got a raw deal with the Jets. So I wasn't surprised either by the fact that he was getting head coaching interest, and he's probably going to get head coaching interest in the future as well, right? As long as he's not one. So, yeah, I just wanted to mention that. Like I do acknowledge that there's that possibility, but I do also think that he was deserving of getting that head coaching interest. But so another thing that Matt Barrows mentioned was that Saleh will have strong say on draft picks for his side of the ball if he signs here. That would make me ecstatic because I'm like, this is a dude that knows what he wants. He knows the system that he's running and what players fit most best in that system, right? And so that would actually really excite me. And another thing too, Johnny, is like the fact that he did have that time, with the Jets. There are some interesting free agents out there that could become available for, the 49ers that, maybe could make their way to San Francisco, right? So
yeah,
that's another intriguing thing to me in all this.
I think the name really to look at on that list is DJ Reed. Now, I think a lot of people look at Hassan Reddick and think, okay, good edge rusher. I think he's on the wrong side of 30. He also just had a lengthy contract issue there with the Jets after they traded for him. That's why he only played 34 snaps. I don't want any part of that. So I think for me, you've already got Leonard Floyd under contract. I think you need to get a defensive front that can fit everything they do, or you go and look at a guy in the draft. I think they're going to go interior defensive line early. I would not be surprised if it's the first round with what they've done. But I think DJ Reed is a very intriguing name because I do think because he didn't play every snap last year, and he's approaching 30. I don't think he gets that really big deal. I think he's going to get a deal very similar to what he's had in the Jets. And I think he's going to want to go with Robert Saleh, who knows exactly how to get the most out of him. It may be on a 1 or 2 year deal he goes and tries to see if he can parlay that into a big contract. But, circling back to, I think the Rooney Rule thing, I get frustrated when everybody just assumes that any coach who's brought in is to satisfy the Rooney Rule. And I get that stuff does happen. It could also be that there's some guys that it's going to be a little bit of both, that they need to satisfy a Rooney Rule. And remember, some of these agents may be pushing things and saying, okay, I will help you get maybe a little bit better deal with this coaching candidate that you're looking at this year because I also represent this guy and I want to raise his stock. And so if you bring him in to satisfy the Rooney Rule and we raise his stock, then I will help you in your negotiation here or there. I mean, those are things that really do happen. We don't like to think that they do, but they do happen. But I just don't like that it's automatically assumed. Okay, this guy's
Right.
Saleh is only getting this. It's not because of his merit. It's not because his defensive system has been one of the best defensive systems in the league for the last 4 years, 5 years. It's because he's satisfying a Rooney Ruggo. Look, if that was really the case, these guys would have sham interviews with people in their own buildings. I mean, come on. You don't. To me, I don't think you fly somebody out. You spend the money to do that. You go through this whole interview process unless you have legitimate interest in them and want to find out about who they are as a coach for down the road, for other positions if they were to become available. If it's like, okay, this guy's on a staff that maybe will only last 1 more year, and we're gonna be looking for coordinators. You are always looking for quality coaches, so why not bring in somebody who you think could be a very good coach down the road and interview him as well? I think it can be all of these things. But just to assume, I think is extremely, I think it's insulting to a lot of the coaches that are getting the interviews. There's a lot of different people that can interview. There's a reason why only the ones that are interviewed are interviewed. That frustrates me as well. But I think looking at the draft, they're definitely going to go defensive line early. I think interior defensive line. I would like to see DJ Reed, another guy that Saleh, as far as we know, had a big input on him being drafted. DJ Jones. I think he's going to be entering free agency from Denver and played so well in this system under Robert Saleh. And Robert Saleh was a big reason he was a 49er. So I think those are 2 names that really make sense, I think, going forward. And Robert Saleh can really, his name being here can really make it attractive to those guys.
That was one of my thoughts as well, because I love DJ Jones. Obviously, I don't think you bring him back to be a starter, right? But he's still putting up quality snaps even at his age. I do think the 49ers address, interior defensive line as well fairly early. There's definitely something that's been missing for them. But man, if you could get DJ Jones back, even as a rotational guy, that would be incredible. I would definitely be on board for that. Now, the other couple things that are happening in the background here is that, Robert Saleh may be thinking about, if he does return for 49ers defensive coordinator, who's going to be part of his staff. Well, we do know that Brandon Staley is not going to be retained. But the other name that has been mentioned quite a bit is Joe Woods, who is Saleh's secondary and DB's assistant in 2019. And he was with the Jets as well in Saleh's time there. So that could be an intriguing one. I think for the most part, he'd probably retain some of the guys that are, the assistants that are still part of this team that overlapped with his tenure as 49ers DC previously as well. But what do you think about Joe Woods and potentially bringing him back?
Well, and these all may be things that they're working through as they're trying to hire him, as it's really truly becoming official, because what you don't want to do is 3 days after Nick Sorensen's gone, you don't want to sit there and say, well, we've got a deal in place for Robert Saleh, but he's got to go do all these head coaching interviews. But what we're going to agree to is that he will bring over a guy who is currently under contract with another team, hadn't at least at that point wasn't officially not there, but everybody knows he's going to be gone eventually, but he's still officially with another team, and we're going to replace somebody that is on our staff because Robert Saleh doesn't want to work with him. If that ever, these guys are just a few offices away from each other. If that noise were to trickle down the hallway, you have a potentially really horrible situation within your staff if this whole thing comes about. So again, it can be things that they're going, okay, now that you're here, we need to work through this. And what is this? And so that very well could be the things that are going on inside the building right now as we speak, of figuring out, are they going to retain him? Who does Saleh really want to work with? I think what they've learned over the last couple of years is those staff dynamics, to me, have to be, there's something not right in the building. We got the sense of that with Steve Wilkes. I think you could see it from film really clearly that the front end and the back end were not on the same page, that there was very much a much different emphasis on the defensive staff of position groups than there was in the past. And then there were some reports coming out after the year that that was exactly what was going on, was that Steve Wilkes wanted to emphasize the back end and do all these really exotic things and wanted to simplify the front end, and that led to issues. And I think Sorensen in there is trying to work through these, and it just clearly that defense was not on the same page. I mean, when you had a 12-man on the field penalty, and then it looked like you almost had another 12-man on the field penalty the next play, like something on the headsets is not going right. Like there's communication in there that is not going right. And so like all of this stuff, there is just issues organizationally, and you find out, during preseason, he's turned play calling duties over because he's wanting to be on the defensive headsets and hear what is the communication like between the staff members. This isn't communication from even staff to players, but how is Nick Sorensen directing that traffic on the headsets during a game and then during the week? And so I think what they're really making sure of this time is the staff and the defensive coordinator have to all be on the same page. Like Kyle Shanahan said about his time in Cleveland, because he was asked about Bobby Turner. Why didn't you have Bobby Turner there with you in Cleveland? And he said, well, as a coordinator, you don't always get to choose your own staff. And, and so he's aware of these things. And I think they're working through that of they've got to piece together. And if you want to work with somebody else, or if you don't want to work with somebody, then we need to know who you're going to work through, and we have to figure out that entire process. Which is then interesting, because they're also going to look at it and say, okay, if you're going to overhaul our defensive staff, do we then are we really just going to do this when you're probably going to only be here 1 year, or 2 years? I mean, so there's a lot for them to work through on that. I think there's mutual, like everything's been, there's mutual interest. They both want this to work. They both want him to be there. He wants to be there. They want him to be there, but they've got to work through the ins and outs and and all the finite details of this stuff. And I think it's trickier than maybe at first glance.
Yeah, and apologies because I misspoke on Joe Woods. He was the defensive coordinator of the Saints this past season. Did not follow Saleh to the Jets, but they have worked together in the past. And with the Saints looking for a new head coach, very well could spell the end of the road for Joe Woods in New Orleans. So just something to keep an eye on. And another thing too, that I would not be shocked if the 49ers would maybe want to consider for anyone that Saleh potentially brings in is, could this be someone who, hey, if you left, could this be someone we can then promote as a defensive coordinator? Again, like Joe Woods could potentially come in under Saleh, and he could be the defensive coordinator for the 49ers if Saleh then were to leave, right? So just little things like that could, if the 49ers could get Saleh and also have a succession plan in place, I think that would be the best case scenario for them. And I think they would look to wanting to line that up if they could. But yeah, definitely, like we said, a lot of moving parts, not just with the 49ers, but the entire NFL, and it's a huge web, right? A lot of those things do connect. And another thing that we heard today, Bobby Slowick, former 49ers passing game coordinator, now Texans offensive coordinator, now let go by the Texans. He was their offensive coordinator for a couple years. With D'Amico Ryan being the head coach there, with CJ Stroud. And of course, like he was with the 49ers from 2017 to 2022. So a long record of being with San Francisco. Now, do you see that as potentially being a possibility, like for him to come back? I know like there was a lot of interest in him last season as potentially a head coaching gig. And, these Slowick brothers, they get a lot of interest around the league. So maybe they'll be interested in him elsewhere, but let's just say if not, like, do you kick the tires and look to bring him back and, screw it, let's just run it back with everyone?
Yeah, I mean, what it starts to feel like is okay. I mean, let's bring Kinlaw and Solomon Thomas back too. But
while we're at it.
Yeah. But I think that's news that really surprises all of us. The big question, I think, in Houston is going to be, well, okay, who's going to be your offensive coordinator next year? I mean, what names are out there that you're really that have been getting some buzz and that you're really interested in? Because you have some really, big time coordinator positions that are going to be opening up now with the Lions and the Buccaneers and now the Texans, and these are all playoff teams. That they're now facing some serious questions about who's going to come in and run those offenses. So I think he's going to get looks. Honestly, he makes sense in Houston. Ben Johnson ran a system very, very similar to what the 49ers run there in Detroit. And so I would not be surprised if Dan Campbell reaches out to him and sees what they need, how much interest there is in coming onto his staff.
Do you mean to say Slowick makes sense in Detroit?
Yes.
Okay. You said Houston.
Yeah. Sorry. I missed.
I got you. I got you.
But yeah, so like this really puts sorry, I just got a text message about next week, and so I'm trying to wrap my mind around that. But I think Slowick makes sense there. I think he's going to get a look. I think there's going to be interest possibly in New York with the Jets because they're coming off of, they ran a similar system. A lot of the nomenclature was the same. The route names are mostly all the same there with the system that was being run in New York. And so I think he's going to get a look there. I think he's built a good enough resume that he does get another look, but it's one of those that the 49ers probably reach out and say, look, we can't make you an offensive coordinator here. That's not what we can do, but we will find a place for you on our staff. If you can't land somewhere, I know you want to go run an offense somewhere and you want to establish it because, and I think that the New York thing is interesting just because that was where he was getting buzz already from Woody Johnson being interested in him apparently as a head coach there. So I would be surprised if he doesn't land somewhere as an offensive coordinator. But the 49ers I'm sure are going to give an open-ended offer. We'll find a place for you on our staff, but he's also going to say, I think I can go. I have a lot of options out there at this point in my life.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think he's going to explore those before going back to his old team. But it's definitely a possibility. And, as Dre Area mentions, Rand Carthon as well is suddenly available. So like maybe he could come back. I haven't heard any buzz about him and with other, GM positions available. So I guess we'll just have to see. But yeah, again, lots of moving parts, guys, and the coaching carousel does not end. In fact, even for the 49ers, they're also looking for a special teams coordinator, and they just recently announced another interview that they had, and that was with Brent Boyer, who is the Jets special teams coordinator right now. And that's an interesting one because I think we can kind of put two and two together that Boyer might have been, given that name, or he might have gotten the nod from Robert Saleh, right? Like Robert Saleh put in a good word and said, hey, like, I think he'd be great to be your special teams coordinator. I know you're looking for one, but I had a good experience with him. And, it's interesting because, he had been with the Jets for 6 years. He's survived 3 regime changes. Like that's not nothing. I mean, if you can survive that much turnover, it usually means you're pretty good at your job and people want to keep you around. So that's definitely another interesting option for the 49ers. I've said it, like I've kind of enjoyed the 49ers special teams coordinator search a little bit more than the DC, just because there's been more names and like to me, like they've been more intriguing because all of the guys who they've interviewed have been from like good special teams.
Yeah. This definitely seems like over time it's moved on from, we have guys with a lot of potential to, because they've done this in the draft too, which is we want really proven guys. And and that's what we're seeing because the 49ers special teams unit has just been so awful for so many years. I mean, this season it was exacerbated because you had so many. Their record in close games was so bad, and when you have missed kicks and you have special teams blunders, it's just like okay, you can legitimately look to it and say, special teams really cost us a game. Special teams was really a big reason why we were out of it by the time the end of the season came around. And it's like, yes, you were going to need a miracle with everything that happened. You're starting a practice squad left tackle, but you still would have had a chance. Special teams made that a non-factor in a bad way. So I like the thing. I think it's interesting that right now McCole Hardman is dropping some you could say slander to Brant Boyer about his time in New York and for special teams, and saying that was why he wanted out of New York and everything. I don't know. I don't always take too well to when you have players who need to boost their brand. Having moments like that just happen to come out at those times. It just always makes me go, And when they're complaining about the things he's complaining about, when you're paid as well as they are, as players are, and going, well, he didn't talk to me till like before game that I was going to be returning punts. So I was like, nah, man. I'm like, bro, you're paid millions of dollars to do this.
Yeah.
No. If I did that at any job that I've ever worked, like just, if my boss came up to me and said, hey, we need you to fill in for this person, because this happened, and I was just like, you should have told me 2 days ago. I ain't doing that. I ain't doing that for you. I ain't running that machine. No, my boss would have every reason to fire me, and I'm not paid millions of dollars. So, I don't have any patience for that kind of complaining on that and making noise. So I think you just look at the overall, what is the special teams units done, and they've been, like you said, very good.
Yeah, and so another intriguing name that the 49ers added to the list, and it's been reported by one of the beat writers, it was one of the Matts, either Matt Barrows or Mayoko, that the 49ers want to get their head coach, their special teams coordinator position announced or, picked within the next week. So we'll get more information. Hey, like maybe we'll find out while we're at the Senior Bowl who the 49ers next special teams coordinator is. And certainly, hopefully we find out sooner than that who the 49ers defensive coordinator is. And as RJ the Fanatic says here, thank you, RJ. He says it would be a fantastic birthday present if the 49ers can land Saleh today. Happy birthday, RJ. And yes, I 100% agree. I think we all need this to happen and become official at this point. I think we're all tired of waiting. We all have known for some time now that Robert Saleh has been the number one. We just want it to be done and over with so we can move on to the draft. And speaking of draft, Senior Bowl, just one last question I have for you is, what are some positions that you're looking forward to the most? Because I've seen the trenches, man. Offensive line, defensive line are absolutely stacked for this year's Senior Bowl. I think that's what I'm most looking forward to.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a phenomenal year, and I think that might be one reason the 49ers have a member of their staff going to coach at the Senior Bowl, that they want to get an even more in-person look. They want to get an in-team meetings look at guys, because all these guys are going to play special teams at some point. You got a bunch of guys that play on the line, and you got some defensive ends that play on the line or play on punt coverage and punt return. And so I think they're definitely looking, want to get an in-person. Plus, as we remember, when special teams units have hardly any time during the Senior Bowl practices to do anything. They're given 5 minutes at the end of practice. So what do those special teams coordinators that are coordinating special teams at the Senior Bowl do? Those coaches, we've watched them just float, and they can go wherever position groups they want, and they help out at position groups. So you have a coach on the field working with the players, working in the meetings for free at the Senior Bowl. You get to look at both those offensive and defensive lines, get a really good look at them, get a look at some DBs. I think that's where what they've also noticed is that when you have DBs that you're going to be picking that might be your sixth corner, special teams is going to make the difference. Darrell Luter, we remember from the Senior Bowl, special teams has had a couple really unfortunate special teams moments on this team. And so you're going to say, okay, if I'm going to have a guy as my sixth DB, he can't have a ball go off his foot in the Super Bowl that changes the game. And so you want to see, how are these DBs on special teams? You want to see that, and you want to get a look at that, and you want to get a look at that in the meeting rooms, and how well do they react to that. So I'm really fascinated with this year's Senior Bowl. I think this is the most, each year is amazing, and each year to see these guys in the practices is so valuable. But if there's any year that I've been most excited about, it's this year.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So yes, as you mentioned, 49ers have one of their assistant special teams coaches that will be coaching special teams at the Senior Bowl, and they're also going to be represented at the Shrine Bowl as well. In addition to obviously having their scouts there, they're also going to be having some assistants coaching the running backs, the defensive line, and DBs at the Shrine Bowl. So they're kind of, they're out there, and they're definitely getting creative in their ways of scouting. And I don't think it's a coincidence, the positions that they're coaching for, because yes, those would definitely be some positions of need and interest for the 49ers in this draft. But can't wait to see you out there, Johnny. There's definitely going to be some emerging prospects that are going to grab our attention. Last year was Braden Fisk, and we saw how big of a year he had for the Rams this year. So hopefully the 49ers could get one of those guys that stands out as well. But Johnny, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a blast. And again, we're going to have to chop it up next week and probably do a recap show of the Senior Bowl after that. So make sure you guys subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, not just mine, but Johnny's as well. Of course, you guys probably already subscribed to Johnny, because why wouldn't you be? Johnny's Football Academy. So make sure you guys tune into that. Make sure you like this video if you haven't yet. And audio listeners, leave a rating, leave a review. But for now, have a good rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend. For now, peace.